Welcome back to the latest episode of the Faces of Family Business, the series where we seek to shine a spotlight on the family business sector and the huge contribution that it makes to the economy both here and further afield. Now, for many of us, our interaction with family businesses will be when we walk into a shop on the high street. I think that sort of setting is great for letting us see all of the unique attributes that make family businesses such a success. And that's why it is great that today we're joined by Stephen McCammon, who is the Managing Director of Menarys, a department store with outlets both in Northern Ireland and also in England. Stephen, thank you so much for coming in and giving us some of your time. Do you want to just kick things off by telling us where Menarys is as a business today?
Yeah, thank you very much, Darren. As you say, we've just celebrated our 100th year. We've just acquired another business just in the last month or so. Maybe it reflects a little bit as to where the business is today, in that we're in a position to make an acquisition of that nature. As all family businesses, in fact, all businesses in this era, we've gone through the peaks and troughs of an economy that is constantly moving and shifting. So we've had tough times and particularly good times, and at the minute it feels that the business is in a solid keel, able to move forward.
And how many locations in all do you have then, Steve?
23 locations, 20 in Northern Ireland, 2 in the Republic and 1 in England.
That's a big operation. A far stretch from that one single store where presumably all began.
Yeah, it all began in 1923 in Market Square in Dungannon. My great uncle, he and a brother, they decided to set up a store a little bit earlier than that, back in 1920 in Ballymena, and his brother then got married, and then the awkward family business conversation came along, which was, look, Joe, this business can handle one family, it can't handle 2, you're going to have to move. So Joe then moved to Cookstown and set up another business with another brother. And regrettably the exact same thing happened. His brother married, and the awkward conversation came around, so Joe had to move once again. In 1923 he chose Market Square in Dungannon, and there it started. The business traded as Alexander's right up until probably into the late 80s. At that stage, my father, who had joined the business as a probably a 14-year-old, at that stage he had bought another business in Lisburn which was called Menarys Brothers. So at that point there was Alexander's in Dungannon and there was Menarys in Lisburn. Dad then, in 1983 or 84, he bought a department store in Newtonards, and his exhaustive market research involved walking down the street in Newtonards and stopping 10 customers and asking, have you heard of Alexander's of Dungannon? Or have you heard of Menarys of Lisburn? More had heard of Menarys of Lisburn, and so the Menarys brand went forward from that point onwards. So
yeah, very good.
That's the background to the name.
Yeah, so. And the Menarys name then, it was outside of that original family connection. And
yeah. So it was another historic family business that had no succession. It had come to the end of its life at that point, and Dad stepped in and carried it on. So
very good. What do you think are the key differences in family businesses that mean they're such an important part of the economy in this part of the world and further afield?
The word that just keeps coming up time and time again is community. And I see ourselves, I believe we are a community retailer. Our job is to try and become part of the community, more than just an economic entity. And I think what you see with family businesses is they, wherever they exist, wherever they trade or manufacture or whatever, they have a vested interest in the community, in the people, and that then expands into, whether that's into schools, into local organisations, charities, churches, whatever that might be. There is a sense of family businesses engaging in communities, and I think Northern Ireland as a whole has a real rich history in that, and it's something that's not championed, if that's the right word, perhaps as much as it probably should. If we lose that sense of business and community connecting, I think we lose that at our peril. Our town centres will become very bland, they will become boring. The fabric of society will change dramatically if that family business community touch point no longer existed.
That's a really interesting point. It's a very virtuous cycle, I think, economically. If you're engaged in the community, that you're getting business, no doubt. It's not the front reason for doing it, but I'm sure that's part that's leading to the success.
Absolutely, and make no mistake, every family business we have to be profitable. We can't exist if without being profitable. But our way to being profitable, our way to being the best that we can be, is to try to engage as much as we can in our local marketplace.
So if you look back over centenary, I'm assuming, Stephen, that you're more familiar with the latter part of that 100 years.
Yeah.
So if you look back at that period of time, what sort of highlights do you, as you've grown the business quite significantly in that period to 23 locations now?
Yeah, it's coming through the tough times have been the bits that have made me most proud of our team. Coming through the credit crunch in sort of 2009 through 2014, really difficult time for the business. For all sorts of reasons. We had probably taken on more debt than we would have liked, as did lots of other businesses, because funding was so available. We opened quite aggressively in Southern Ireland, paying rents that were sustainable at the tail end of the Celtic Tiger, but were certainly not sustainable beyond that. So fighting our way through that and surviving, but then finding ourselves on an even keel and being plunged into COVID, where obviously we were closed a number of times, but continued to have bills to pay. I look back at what our team did as a collective to get through those two seasons, and I think that would be. For me, it's the moment where I've stepped back and thought, wow, there's something special in our business DNA where people will dig deep, will fight hard to see the business not just survive but thrive. And I think if I go back, if I kind of take the DNA back a little bit, I'm living the dream. I went through primary school and my friends wanted to be footballers, firemen, astronauts. I wanted to work in the shop. That was my stock answer. What do you want to do? And there was one shop, and it was, I want to work in the shop. And I'm living my dream. Yeah. As I grew up, I watched Dad deal with the troubles, just how that played out in terms of numerous bombings, in terms of the various threats that were very alive with that, and I guess that built a resilience, and I think that resilience. I think it's something that's very specific and very strong within family businesses in Northern Ireland. Those businesses that existed through the 70s and the 80s and early 90s, there was something very resilient within them that whenever it turned from issues with perhaps the troubles, whenever it became to economic issues or then pandemic issues, we knew how to fight, we knew how to dig deep, and I think that's something that, I'm not saying other businesses don't have that, but I think within a family business, the stakes in a family business are greater than purely the financials. You're a custodian at that point in time for the history or of the history, and I think being able to fight hard to preserve that and protect that is something that Northern Irish family businesses, I think, are very good at.
I think those are excellent points, and I think that backdrop, we're of a similar age, Stephen, so I remember my children thankfully don't remember anything that we experienced in terms of even walking into a shop in the centre of Belfast where there was army in the doors and things that you look back at and you think, my goodness. But to be in that space, trading through it, you know, it's humbling to think what you had to come through.
Yeah.
It's an incredible achievement. You mentioned that watching your dad. What's your earliest memory of getting involved in the family business? Were you in aged 5 or 6? Or
Yeah, I would have been in, you know, probably my earliest memories, this is pre-cash register. So the Dungannon shop had this kind of vacuum system that went right around inside the walls back to a central cash office, and you had these little canisters. So if a salesperson made a sale, they put the money and the DOCA in this vacuum thing, put it in the pipe, and this thing shot the whole way back to like a cash office, and the people in the cash office took the money out, put the change in, and fired it back to wherever it went. So I remember sitting probably age sort of 8 or 9. I'd have been sitting on a stool at this bank of suction pipes, and these. And you'd wait for you'd just sit and wait for these canisters to come shooting in, and you would then send the change back. Then as time went on, the roles became more interesting. I think once I remember probably when I was 17, I just got my driver's license. That summer we had opened 3 stores. I got involved in the shop fitting of those because I could drive. So myself, I hooked up with brought a couple of my friends from school, but extra money for them. We jumped in the car every morning. We went off to one of the shops and pretended we knew what we were doing when we really didn't. And we could have been painting. We could have been sort of building shop fitting. It was just you know, that was all hands-on. It was all good fun. It was all good background. After I graduated, I spent a year with Sainsbury's in North London before I came back to the family business. I did my dissertation. The title that I chose for my dissertation was Multiple Retail Management, Managers or Machines. And that was my takeaway from working with Sainsbury's for a year, was that really multiple retail management at on a large scale did not really require managers. It wanted and needed machines, people who knew that there was a standing orders instruction book for every eventuality, and the book told you exactly how to do it. That's not what I want, and it really shaped my belief in how I wanted our business to be. I came away with a renewed belief that Menarys needed to have managers. It needed to have people who were free to actually run their store as they saw fit, not because there was a bunch of instructions. You know, really good retailers are good decision makers. They're good managers. They make good decisions on the spot. We'll often talk to our team about, you know, manage it as if it's your name over the door. And that is you know, if you think about it's your name over the door and you make a decision based on that, chances are it'll be the right decision.
We're talking here about family business. So your dad, you and your brother are both in the business now.
Yeah.
Stephen, and I suppose I've got 3 teenage children now, so I speak from personal experience. I can see disagreements emerging in my home, and I'm sure in a business setting that's possibly the case as well. Have there been any? How do you deal with them?
There would have been a time at its peak where my mum, my dad, myself, 2 brothers, my wife, 2 of Dad's cousins, one of his cousins' wives, his brother-in-law, would all have been there. You know, having grown up in an environment like that, you know, you had to work out, you know, how to kind of run the business, get your view across, but you know, but understand that this is family, and when we try not to fall out as best we can. I have to say fair play to my wife, who for a number of years worked with her mother-in-law in the buying team, and that was which was great. Those were great times. But it's you know, it's stuff like that is you know, it is a challenge. But I think what probably Dad always probably directed us towards was, like, you have your opinion, you have your row, you have your disagreement, debate, whatever you want to call it, but you've got to get together again the next day and go forward again. So I genuinely, while there's plenty of disagreement, and I'm sure Philip goes home and gives off about me, and I know I go home and give off about him from time to time, but we're very close. We get on well. I think the business has strengthened our relationship more than anything else.
And you mentioned that from a young age you were keen to be in the business. Did you ever feel any pressure, you, your brothers, from your dad to be part of the business?
No. I think Dad. Look, my dad's my hero. He was we were great friends. He died. It's coming 6 years ago this September. But he was my closest colleague. Throughout my working life. But what I think Dad did remarkably well was in terms of transition. Transition within family businesses is very tricky, and Dad handled that. I felt he handled that really well with us. He worked very closely with each of us on our way through. But then there was a point in time where he said, it's time, and he slipped off and allowed us to make our own mistakes, of which we've made many, and hopefully take on a lot of the good stuff he taught us.
But that relationship point you're making there, I think, is an important one. That it sounds to me like he was still there, on hand with that wisdom and advice when you needed it.
100% he was. Until he died, I would have spoken to Dad several times every week as a sounding board. I might have gone to him. I remember, it sounds bizarre, but again, it's could only happen in a family business probably. He had a terminal diagnosis of it was acute myeloid leukemia. And I remember night after night sitting in Craigavon Hospital with him, where I would have been going through sales figures with him and talking through plans, knowing that he knew the clock was ticking and he was he had weeks left to live, but he just so passionately wanted to know what was going to happen in the months and the years afterwards. What was the plan? And that was. That wasn't a hardship for him. That was an excitement for him to know there was a plan and know how things were looking at that time.
And I think this leads neatly on to the Faces of Famil Business exhibition that Ulster University ran recently. What was your motivation for wanting to get involved with that exhibition?
Around every family business you'll find things that are a nod to the past. And whenever Ian first approached us about taking part, there was probably one thing in particular that I went back to him and said, look, is this the type of thing you're interested in, which is this ring? And I kind of, at that point in time, I remember chatting to our own guys in our marketing team about it, and I realised there was this story that I knew, but even our team didn't know, and therefore it just seemed that the Faces exhibition was an appropriate time to maybe shine a little bit of a light on it. So it was
what's the background to this story then?
Oh, the background, quite simply, it's a ring, signet ring that my dad gave it to me. But the story of the ring was that the ring was given to Joseph Alexander in 1920, before he set off with his first brother to open up. He had served his time as a retailer in a business in Newry called Newell Stores. So whenever he left Newell Stores, they presented him with this ring, and it's engraved in the inside, wishing him well as he moved out into his career in retail. He wore this ring. He then passed it on to my dad. But before he had passed it on to my dad, he lost it. He was a very keen market gardener, and he lost it literally in the ground, where he grew vegetables and stuff like that many years ago. And then probably 15, 20 years later, he had moved house. In fact, I think Uncle Joe may have passed on at this stage, but the man who had bought the house that he had previously lived in came to Dad with this ring. He had found it in the soil himself, and he said, look, Brian, is this yours, or is this any connection of yours? And Dad was like, I know exactly what this is. This is Uncle Joe's ring. So shortly after that, Dad gave it to me, and it's a ring that I remember particularly during, you asked me earlier about the kind of particular highlights, and I referred to to the surviving the credit crunch and surviving through COVID.
Yeah.
And the times I looked at my ring, it was a constant visual reminder of something that predated all of today's troubles and came through other troubles. You know, it reminded me that our business had gone through World War II. It reminded me that our business had gone through interest rates at 17%. It reminded me that we had come through the troubles, and therefore, it gave me a steel to say, we've come through all of this. We're not going to allow a credit crunch or a pandemic to stop our movement forward. And then you guys came along, obviously, to putting together the exhibition, and it just seemed a really appropriate artifact, if you want, or piece of history.
An artifact that talks about anchor and puts things into perspective for you, which I'm sure in the middle of COVID, when you're running a retail operation of your size, was lonely and challenging at times, and to have something that put all that into context must have been a powerful motivator.
Yeah.
Because your doors were closed for periods of that time, I assume.
Our doors were closed at a time when others, so Marks and Spencer's, for example, because they sold food, were able to open and were allowed to open their homewares and their clothing departments and whatever. It was difficult. We had to fight hard for our sector, and I say it's not. If you look at the family businesses within hospitality and the way that they suffered at that time, or independents, there were a lot of things around business rates relief, around when we could or couldn't reopen. That it always felt to us that the voice of the independent wasn't heard quite as loudly. If we had a blue chip FTSE 100 reference to wave in front of somebody, that might have got us a little bit further, a little bit faster. We worked our way through that. Yeah.
Not an easy period to be trading through, in fairness to you.
Definitely not. I know, there are no doubts that in both of those seasons, survival, that in itself was a challenge. There was no givens here. There was no certainty about employment. There was no certainty about survival. Our team, I could not praise the team that I have in this business more. There's something tangible about the culture of I think most family businesses that do tend to anchor people within them. They tend to be more than just a 9 to 5. They tend to be something that people have a real passionate, vested interest in seeing success. And
your various stores, you engage with other retailers around giving them space and involving them in your.
But back pre-COVID, we would have had a lot of concessions in store shops. Our biggest partner would have been the Arcadia Group, which was Topshop, Wallace, Dorothy Perkins, the Philip Green empire. Probably at a time there might have been 20, 25 partner brands that we would have had within our stores. Coming out of COVID, in terms of making our model fit for purpose, we decided the way forward was not with concession partners. It's probably a better way for us to run the business, where we're not at the mercy of the success or failure of a third party.
Sure, yeah, that speaks back to you being able to control the values and what's going on there and all the rest of it.
Yeah,
that's good. And you must offer. You mentioned online there. Online shopping has become a massive part of all of our lives, but also as a consumer myself, I see the value in being able to go in and physically lift products. Is that how strategically are you talking through that big shift?
Yeah, look, it's online it's a fantastic proposition, and it's getting better and better in many ways. We as a business have had two goes at it. Both times we went down the online path, we found sales were relatively easy to come by, but finding a way to operate it profitably was a real challenge. a lot of people, whenever you're shopping for something online, you identify what you want in the first instance, and then you search for the lowest price, and it's a race to the bottom. For us to succeed in that, it was just we don't have the margins to play for that maybe some of the bigger players do. This was when we had the internal conversation about who exactly we are, and it's when we realised, look, we are a high street community retailer. That's what we're best at. That's what we should focus on, and continue with that. But every so often you'll pick up a paper or you'll see something online, and it'll tell you the high street's dead. The high street won't die. The high street the high street's been there for hundreds and hundreds of years. There's hardly an industry that predates the trading of stuff in a market square, and that will continue. People like to have stuff available to them. They like the interaction with whoever is selling to them. And while the convenience of online is always going to be with us, there is going to be a leveling off. There will be a flattening, and the high street will just find its proper place again. Our town centres probably need to change. They're not fit for purpose, in the sense that they were developed through probably the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, where the amount of retail premises, retail stock on our high streets is way more than we actually need. So how our high streets repurpose is a matter for probably local councils and planning to reimagine what a town centre looks like. It won't be dominated by retail the way it once was, but I think there is a new mix that we need to find, which will be retail, which will be a certain amount of town centre living, which will be a certain amount of town centre social activities. But yeah, that's a long-winded way of talking about the internet. I don't believe the internet's there. It'll settle in its place. But yeah, I believe passionately in high streets. I think they'll be here for some time.
And on that note, Stephen, where do you see, what's your vision for Menarys in the next 3 to 5 years?
We're wired for growth. We're our team are excited about growth. What's probably shaped us a lot in the post-COVID years, we've become a lot more active with our importing directly from China and certainly further afield. That's enabling us to give better value to our customers. We're a small business, but for a business of our size, we're taking some fairly courageous decisions in our importing strategy, and that's something that excites us, because we think that will enable us to grow and expand a little bit further. Do we want to pursue growth at all costs? Absolutely not. Again, that's something you live and you learn. In my 30s, we pushed things pretty hard. We took on debt to do so. We want to grow in a very managed and careful way, and that's I think we've a team in place that are well equipped to do so.
And to wrap things up then, Stephen, what's the one critical value you think that a family business gives you the edge in the marketplace with?
One critical value. If I go back to Dad had a language that he used that carried our business through probably my formative years, and he talked about having a caring culture. Now, that could have been misunderstood by people, and some people did misunderstand it, and they thought that meant it was a soft culture. But the way he described a caring culture, and that meant that our staff cared for one another, the business cared for our staff, we all collectively cared for our customers, but we did so in a fair way, not in a way to be walked over, but in a fair and honest way. And just those words, they took me a long time to fully understand what that meant. And I think having a business, running a business that has a caring culture, that at its heart it cares about its people, be that those in its employment, be that those who it's doing its best to serve on a daily basis, be that our suppliers. It's whoever the stakeholder is within the business. If we have a careful approach to that and a caring attitude to that, that will always, in my opinion, it will give us. It just sets us aside a little from the normal cut and thrust of business.
That's a great answer, Stephen. That's a great answer. And I think that's a fantastic place for us to end. The core value there Stephen's highlighting is that of care in a family business, and that does lead to a real differential for family businesses in the marketplace. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Faces of Family Business. That was really informative, and we look forward to seeing you for the next episode.